Good day, viewers. Welcome to a fresh edition of 30 Minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television with me, Manir Dan Ali. Our guest today is a professor of capital market from Nassarawa State University, a well-known commentator on business and economic affairs in Nigeria, and a former commissioner also in Imo State. At one time, he was the chief economist of the Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm talking about Professor Uche Uwaleke. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Manir. My pleasure being here.
We want you to help us understand some of the thorny economic issues. For the man on the street, he cannot figure out why, while things are still tough,
yes,
and while the dollar was being blamed previously for the hike in prices, now that the dollar is beginning to come down, it's about 1,000 naira now to the dollar as against 1,900, 850 or what have you in the last few weeks.
Yes.
Why are prices of local items not reflecting that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Manir. I think basically it has to do with the fact that we are an import-dependent country. We import so many things, and even for goods.
But we don't import yam.
Yes, I'm getting to that. Yes, but even for those things we don't reproduce here. Okay, much of it too, in terms of the raw material content, we also import. Now, you find that businessmen or traders must have imported some items, before now, when the exchange rate was quite high. So those items, I believe, are still forming part of their stock. Okay, and until those items are exhausted, before we can begin to talk about restocking at the current level of exchange rates. So when a businessman is able to now restock at the 1,000 naira to the dollar exchange rate as opposed to the 1,800, 1,700, of course, we should now expect that is when the it will now reflect in the price of whatever he's selling.
But the traders were quick to change their prices when the dollar was appreciating. They didn't wait until the stock that was bought with at the new price was available to them.
Yes, you see, again, we are dealing with human behavior. Economics is about, we say economics is a social science that studies human behavior. It's about human behavior first and foremost, okay? Before we begin to talk about the relationship between scars and, means that have alternative uses. So now human behavior, if you buy something, let us say at 100 naira, your cost price, and in your pricing policy, you put markup of 20%. That means you intend to sell it at 120 naira. Okay?
Yes.
If you sell it below 100 naira cost price, you are selling at a loss. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if you have bought at 100 and you want to sell you plan to sell at 120, and you hear that the same item is already being sold at 150 or 200 naira as a result of hike in exchange rate, you will also plan to restock. So your pricing policy at that time changes from cost plus markup to replacement cost pricing system. So you're also thinking of staying in the business, because if you're unable to restock at that 200 naira cost
price,
okay, you'll be able to stay in business.
So head or tail, the consumer loses.
The consumer loses. So when exchange rate is rising, it's very easy for a trader, to reprice, because he's thinking of staying in business, he's thinking of replacement cost, ability to restock. But when exchange rate begins to come down, okay, the natural person, again, rational person, I said it's human behavior.
Yes.
You will still want to sell off what you have, because if you sell it below 100 naira, you'll be selling at a loss. So you will still want to sell off what you have before you go to now buy at a lower price. So that is what is playing out. So what I'm saying is the effect really of this low exchange rates on commodity prices, we may not begin to say it until sometime later, much later in the coming months.
But is that why maybe consumers, that the general public, are even suggesting that there should be some form of price control, and will that be the right direction to go?
No. Even the Federal Consumer and the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission admits that it is not its job, or rather, it will be difficult for the government to say they want to control prices. Okay, because the moment you try to control prices, fixing prices, you also create a black market for that. So I think what they have done is to say that if a consumer feels one way or the other is being cheated, of course it can report, particularly with commodities that have to do with intangibles, okay, or even services. If, for example, you find a landlord, okay, increasing the rent arbitrarily, okay, the tenant can also complain, to this commission. Yes. So for intangibles, generally, it's easy to have that kind of control. But when it comes to tangibles like the rice, some things that we consume,
yes,
okay, the price ultimately will be determined by demand and supply, forces. So if I'm selling Gary, for example, and I am arbitrarily increasing my price, of course the consumer has a choice to go to the other person that's also selling. Okay.
But is it the right reflex for even government or authorities to consider this fixing prices? Because as you did suggest, it has also its own costs.
It has its own adverse side effects. The moment you try to say you want to fix prices, we have seen that before, you begin to also create black markets, you begin to also create artificial scarcity. Because if I have bought something at 100 naira, and you're asking me, because exchange rate is coming down, you're saying I should now sell it at 18 naira or 15 naira, and I know doing so will be selling at a loss, of course I will hold it. I'll also find a way to sell it, behind. That's a black market. So you encourage black markets in the process. And that's why I think that as much as possible, we should allow the, markets to, sort out some of the, prices we are experiencing now.
So we should continue to bear the brunt and the hardship and grin maybe happily through it.
No, not necessarily. Yes, of course, the consumer competition and
the Federal Competition
yes,
and Consumer,
the National Orientation Agency, and the government continue to appeal to businessmen.
But will appeal. So, cut eyes with business people.
Exactly.
It's a brutal thing. You bought at a certain price, you can't sell below that price.
See, that's also the point.
How will somebody
appeal
to
that's also the point I was making earlier. Cheaper? That for businessmen are driven by, when I say businessmen, I mean businessmen and women, they are driven by profit motive. So they don't usually bring in issue of morals into what they're doing. And that's why I also said that even that commission, I'm sure they also realize that it's not something they can do by fiat, bring down. But what the government can do, which is also what they've started doing, is to see how they can also come in and be part of that competition.
But how can they? Because government is bad at business. We've seen it over the years. Billions have been sunk into all sorts of businesses, from airlines to shipping lines, yes, and what have you, and even refineries. They've all consumed money and given very little service. So why are you talking of government coming in?
What is bothering the common man now, when I say the ordinary Nigerian now, is food. You can see food.
But the government doesn't cultivate any farm. It doesn't.
No, the government can. In recent times, we've seen government,
you mean bring out from the
grains
stock
from reserves, distributing grains from reserves.
But so those reserves are not limitless.
Yes, I agree. They are not limitless, and government should also deliberately, go into or encourage massive agriculture. When I say government, I don't just refer to the federal government, but also the state government. Okay, by the time they deliberately go into mass production of food, now we are in the planting season now, mass production of food, I'm pretty sure that a few months down the line, food prices will come down. You see, the major challenge.
But the earliest, you are talking of this current planting season, which is just beginning now in different parts of the country. But the earliest we expect new grains and yam and what have you is October.
Okay. Again, I've also recommended, somewhere else, that what the government can also do in the interim, in order to cushion this impact, is to import food. Okay. The idea of opening up the borders, that's good, but we also expect the government to, import food at this moment to see that prices, come down. That's why I talked about government also going into, competing to ensure that prices actually come down.
But there are those who also say that it's a double-edged sword, importation, because it will depress local prices, so that farmers will see that there is no gain in growing your grains, because at the end of the day you will be selling at a loss.
No, but that's a temporary stopgap measure. Importing food, would be a stopgap measure. And while government is also doing that, government is also looking at ways by which to also serve as major off-takers, for people that are producing, so they don't also, run at a loss. Okay. So, however you look at it, government intervention is necessary at this point if food prices, must come down. Besides the, the issue of insecurity, okay, besides the issue of even cost of transport, besides the issue of rising cost of energy, which is also why I think that this idea of hiking electricity tariff at this time is not.
It's not the best.
Oh, it's not the best. It's ill-timed.
Well, ordinary people think it's economists like you who are pushing the government that can't continue with all these reforms, because we've been clapping that they've been doing the right things.
No, it's principally, I think the pressure is coming principally from our development partners, especially the IMF.
You mean the
IMF, yes. Pushing that all manner of subsidies should be removed. And of course, a lot of us are not in support. Okay, particularly at this time, you see, the Nigerians are grappling with the fallout of fuel subsidy removal. The same IMF is even saying that the entire, what they call the implicit subsidy now on fuel, which somebody said the other day is about 600 billion naira a month, that the entire thing should be removed. Okay. So, and of course, the government cannot afford to also remove that. Even the one that has been removed, Nigerians are still grappling with it. And the unification of exchanges. So, because that is still ongoing, it's important that the government should wait until the central bank gets a grip on inflation, before now going ahead with this electricity reforms. So I think it shouldn't come now. I also think there are other inflation triggers along the way, including the minimum wage. It will also trigger inflation, at least inflation expectation. Okay, all of this should
should not happen now.
No, I'm not saying minimum wage shouldn't happen now. I am saying that that's even the more reason the issue of electricity subsidy removal should have been kept in abeyance, at least for now.
You touched on these inflationary concerns, and we've seen the recent figures: food inflation up to 40%, others 30 something.
At 3.2.
Yes.
3.2.
What does all this suggest to you?
Yes, what is suggesting to me is that there is more to the inflation challenge that we or like that the central bank is saying. And you see, the approach of the central bank is the central bank is looking at this whole inflation as largely monetary induced. In other words, monetary factors are inducing inflation. You have too much money in circulation. So the approach is you tighten. Okay, I'm not against tightening policy at this time, but what I don't support is the idea of jacking up rates by amounts or a size that appears disruptive. Okay, so I think even if tightening has to happen, it has to be measured. It has to be incremental. So it's not quite disruptive. By disruptive, I mean it doesn't.
It doesn't prevent lending from happening.
Oh yes,
because banks now
doesn't restrict access to credit. It doesn't raise interest rate to the point where it also begins to form part of rising cost of production, because it can also lead to cost push inflation. What we are even experiencing now is also largely cost push or supply side induced. So
very important point you are making there, but we should go on a short break and resume the conversation thereafter.
All right, Manir, thank you.
Viewers, It is 30 Minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television, and our guest today is Professor Uche Uwaleke, a professor of capital markets and a well-known commentator on economic affairs. Welcome back. It is still 30 Minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television, and our guest is Professor Uche Uwaleke, a professor of capital markets at the Nassarawa State University and well-known commentator on business and economic affairs. Prof, before we went on break, we were talking about all these causative agents of inflation, yes, and the concern about how lending is being squeezed by the additional percentage that the central bank monetary policy has been pushing down the throat of banks. Exactly. And you are quite concerned. But there are people who actually say that you are beating the wrong horse, that actually the money supply, nearly 90% of it is outside the banking industry. That is just about 5 or a little bit over 5% that you are doing all these measures. And that is why you can't see a lot of change.
Okay, the people, those who make that argument are only looking at just one component of money supply, maybe currency in circulation. That's where you have a lot of it that's outside, not much in within the banking system. But if you look at money supply in general, the central bank is not just looking at currency in circulation; it's also looking at the level of demand deposits, the level of savings, the level of time. So what they call broad money. So it is that broad money they are actually targeting. Okay, but the point,
that's including the money hidden in wells and
no, they can't target those ones.
Yes,
they can't, because those ones are outside. They can't target those ones. So the central bank also thinks that because you have the money, the broad money supply is huge. That's also why we're having the pressure in the forex market. A lot of money is chasing, the dollar. Well, the point, to be made is, people have asked this question. You say in February they increased the monetary policy rate by 400 basis points, and just within 1 month, in March again, another 600 basis points. But by the results we saw, MBS result for March, we didn't really see the effect of that February action on inflation, because inflation rate climbed from 31.7% in January, in February, to 33.2% yes, in March. And just as you rightly said, food inflation also jumped to 40%. That's why I talked about the other factors that are driving inflation that are outside monetary, which is why, in my view, the central bank alone cannot tackle this inflation challenge. The fiscal side must also be involved.
Yes, a lot of people have been underlining that the fiscal side, meaning that the government's big policies to do with the economy.
Oh yes, policies particularly to do with energy. Okay, although the good news now we hear that Port Harcourt refinery, Warri refinery, they're about to.
Yeah, but we've been hearing this story of about to.
Yes. Yes, the recent what we are reading recently is that the price of diesel is gradually coming down on account of the fact that Dangote. So these are the things that will ultimately bring down inflation rate, not necessarily, the tightening, aggressive tightening that is being done at the central bank. So
do you expect the monetary policy meeting next time to jack it up further?
If they take my advice, I would advise them to leave it the way it is, and then work on allow what they have done so far. See how it permeates through the economy. As I said, the fiscal side has a lot of role to play if inflation rate must come down. The insecurity thing is also one. Okay, the fact that food inflation today is 40%, and in some states like Kogi State, if you saw that report, food inflation in Kogi State is 48 points, is close to 50% in Kogi State alone. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that tells you that the output issue is very key. That's food output.
Yes.
And now I talked about governments, not only the federal but the state governments also coming together to encourage, agriculture, ensure it is mechanized, ensure that the yields we get, are better. And that's also where our research institutes, our universities, should come in.
But the short-term prospects do not look good for the food inflation because, as we said earlier, until October there will be no new grains, new yam, new cassava, and all the things that could now help to push the prices down.
That's why I also recommended that stopgap measure
of importation.
Yes, the stopgap measure. Government should quickly see how food can be brought in, see how price of these food items can come down.
So let's get to what you will use to do those imports. That's the dollar.
Yes.
We've seen reports recently talking about massive depletion of foreign reserves, and there is usually a certain figure they say that a country should have. This 6-month import, and I don't know whether at the level of import that we do what we have could cover that comfortably.
Yes.
But are you, as an economist, concerned at the rate of the depletion? Because we've seen in a matter of weeks, more than $1 billion has just disappeared, probably trying to prop up what is responsible for the better value of the naira.
Yes, absolutely. I think, all said and done, I think we have sufficient reserves to do to cover at least 3 months of merchandise imports, which is usually the minimum, the thresholds. Yes, I've also seen the trend. The reserves, being depleted, within a short period of time. But that should also be expected, in the sense that the interventions that the central bank has done, again, in recent times, clearly explains that. Central bank says it has cleared backlogs, valid backlogs. Okay, at some point it was put at over, I think about around $7 billion. Central bank says all the valid ones, have been cleared, and that, has contributed so much in restoring confidence in the forex market and calming in the forex market.
But what about that $3 billion from Afrexim? Because we took a loan at commercial rates.
I'm coming. It's not only the $3 billion. The central bank, of course, through NMPC, got $3 billion from Afrexim Bank. Central bank also, we also understand government has also arranged some money from the World Bank. So yes, money has come in by way of loans, but money has also come in by way of foreign portfolio investments, following the increase in hiking rates by the central bank. Some money has
which
also
will quickly disappear. I mean, the portfolio will disappear at the slightest hint of trouble.
That's why, too, I'm not usually... You see, I argued against the hike, because the purpose of the hike is to bring in foreign, and foreign portfolio investors are simply, fair weather friends.
Opportunists.
Yes, so what has come in is hot money. But central bank has used part of the hot money to also,
depress the forex situation.
Okay. Well, you see, one thing is a fact, and that fact is the liquidity we have in the market today, the improvements we have there today, is partly because central bank resumed, sale of forex to BDCs, giving them $10,000, on a weekly basis.
How sustainable is that?
Yes. That's a very good question. So that will be sustained, okay, as long as this inflows keep coming in.
But there's a limit to the loans you can take, because repayments will kick in. Your production, oil production, the main source of forex, is still at a very low level. We've seen recently Libya has overtaken Nigeria. Yes. Nigeria is just doing about 1.1, 1.2.
Yes.
So isn't fixing that problem of even oil exploitation the one sure bet of getting more dollars into the economy?
You can say that again. That is it. For sustainability, what needs to be done, is not in doubt. We need to expand our export base. Okay. We even also need to ramp up crude oil production. Crude oil production, we understand, of course, we saw some improvements between December and January, between even the last quarter of last year, moving from 1.45 million barrels per day to 1.65 million barrels per day. But unfortunately, in March, February, it dropped We understand it dropped because of oil companies doing maintenance work, and so on. But we need to ramp up that to take advantage of the favorable crude oil price.
Because it is the lowest.
Oh
hanging
yes, the lowest
fruit.
hanging fruits.
It's not about expanding
exactly.
export because that one will take time to happen.
Exactly.
But this one is already there.
It's already
running.
there. So I agree with you. It's low hanging. And this.
But it's the big organized cartels who are responsible, who are in the Nigerian security system, who are in government, who are in the society right there in the Niger Delta. Are they too powerful for the government to take on and tame?
Well, I think if what we read is anything to go by, I think some effort is being made in that direction to reduce crude oil theft, which was why I said the major reason we are told that oil output dropped in February and March, again, wasn't because of, yes, it has to do with maintenance. I think the crude oil theft, even though it may not have been eliminated, but it has been reduced significantly, which is also why there is the hope or expectation that April, May, production levels, will increase, substantially. So back to the issue of forex, I agree with you. What is required is, sustainability. But what is happening now? The way I say it is, the central bank is trying to, have a breather. And which is why these stopgap measures have been taken. Recall that the previous under the previous central bank governor, this sale of forex to BDCs was stopped. And one of the reasons they gave for stopping it was because they said it was only in Nigeria that central bank was giving BDCs forex. So it was stopped. Just now it has been resumed. It has been resumed. In order to help bring in liquidity. One of the things they've also done, which also helped this situation of bringing down Naira, is they clamped down on Binance and also trying to eliminate speculative actions in the forex market. So that has gone a long way to help stabilize exchange rate. But we may not begin to see that reflect in commodity prices, again, because of some of these other factors that are also affecting inflation,
which we could probably discuss in our next outing with you.
All right. Fine.
Thank you very much, Professor Uche Uwaleke, for coming on the program. Viewers, that's the end of this edition of 30 Minutes. Keep a date with us.